Hi, my name is Gary Laws and welcome to the very first of my The Only Way is ArchiCAD training sessions. And for me, for the past 30 years, the only way has been ArchiCAD. I started with AutoCAD and have used many CAD programs over the years, but ArchiCAD is head and shoulders above anything I've ever used. It is, of course, not without its faults, and other products have benefits in certain areas. AutoCAD, for example, isn't the market leader for no reason. And the reason it does so well is because it just draws lines. It draws lines and arcs. And if you can draw lines and arcs, you can pretty much draw anything. However, if you've got an industry-specific requirement, if you're in any particular industry and you want to focus on that, then an industry-specific solution will always be better than a 2D CAD program such as AutoCAD. And when I say AutoCAD, I'm meaning all of those 2D CAD products, grouping them all together crudely and inappropriately, I guess. ArchiCAD is a great product for designing buildings, and in my opinion, it's the best. However, it has its faults, and also you wouldn't really want to use it for anything else. And when I talk about faults, let's get them out the way first. I think there are a few things that could be better about ArchiCAD. I, for one, am using ArchiCAD 20. The current release has just been put out as ArchiCAD 27. So why am I so out of date? Well, the simple reason is the updates are so painful. The process of dragging your project up to the new version of ArchiCAD and all the things that have to be changed is costly. It generally takes me about 6 months to come to terms with a new version of ArchiCAD with all that has to be done. But worse than that is its backward compatibility, and each version of ArchiCAD will only open drawings produced in the previous version and the current version. Now, I've been in operation for 20 years, and if you got an update every year, that means you would have to run 10 copies of ArchiCAD in order to bring projects up to the current version. Imagine opening a 20-year-old project. You'd have to bring it through 10 versions of ArchiCAD before you could do anything on it. And that's a massively frustrating and difficult process. And finally, the last thing, which is probably the most frustrating of them all, is the loss of features and functions. With every new release seems to be a loss of things that you used to do that were good, and for some bizarre reason are taken away from you. And I should make a list of these sometime because it is really, really frustrating. And I think the last reason I've stuck with 20 is I don't like the BIM cloud function, and I don't really need BIM, but I like it. It does a few things for me, so I may as well use it. But the server-based version on my own machine is better for me than the cloud-based version. Not a big issue, that, but it's one of the reasons why I've stuck with ArchiCAD 20. And we're increasingly seeing this, people sticking with older versions of ArchiCAD rather than updating. Anyway, those are the bad things. The good things are it's model-based design. And model-based design will always be faster than 2D drafting, and it will always be better integrated. You're unlikely to make the sorts of errors you can make in 2D drafting, where elevations don't tie up to plans and sections don't tie up and things like that. You can generate so much more data more quickly and more accurately in model-based design. And ArchiCAD does all of this really, really well. In this first training exercise, we're going to look at the structure of an ArchiCAD project file. So looking principally at the drawing sheets themselves, the output data that comes from it, and the way in which I like to set up my ArchiCAD. In the second session, we'll dig more deeply into the model itself and how that model is structured, and then thereafter we'll do some training on how to build those things. So the first few are just looking at and analysing the processes themselves. Now, my personal workflow is I use the 3D scanner to capture data. I've got my own scanner. We run that scan data through Autodesk Recap. Really like Recap, nice, easy and straightforward program for point cloud processing. Obviously then from Recap to ArchiCAD, and then finally presentation output is done via Twinmotion. So three principal software products that are used, and in fairness, I rarely need anything else. I do use a bit of sketch imagery, so I've got a little sketch program that I use as well, but really ArchiCAD's functionality is so broad that we don't need much beyond that. You know, the amount of time we spend in Recap and the amount of time we spend in Twinmotion is tiny compared to ArchiCAD. So let's have a look at ArchiCAD itself. So this is my typical screen. I've got it on a single monitor here for the sake of recording. Typically everything on the right hand side of this line here will be on a separate screen for me, and I've got another couple of floating palettes that I will have off to the right of that. So the profile manager, teamwork, and Boolean operations I would have floating off to the right as well. But generally speaking, from that point to the left will be on the left-hand screen, and that point to the right will be on the right-hand screen. I have a minimized toolbar, so the toolbar can be made larger with textual descriptions of everything. That sits on the left-hand side. At the moment, I've got a few drawing sheets open here. I have the broken down, I can't remember what this is called now, the broken down version of each of the tools sits at the top. So if I pick up a relevant tool, you can see here we've got what would appear in the tool palette sat across the top there just for faster access. And then I've got a few additional menus up the top here. I like to have layers visible here. I've got the Twinmotion bits and pieces here, and then some basic ArchiCAD editing through the center there. To the right, I use favorites extensively. I'll cover favorites a little bit later. So I like my favorites to be open all the time. I generally have teamwork status open as well. This is all our views, and I'll come to views in a second. Here we have our trace and reference palette stuck down here, and here we have our renovation status at this point. Sorry, that was a phone call I just had to kill. So these three bars, these three panels here cover views and drawings. And we've got two sorts of views in an ArchiCAD drawing. We have two sorts of views in ArchiCAD. We just have nominal views where we can move around plans, sections, elevations, and so on. And then we have saved views, which is what this map here is. And these saved views carry with them pen information, line weight information, layer structure, model view options, which I'll cover later. So we can format and structure a view that can then appear in a drawing sheet, and that's effectively what these are. These are our free-form views, just straightforward navigation of the model, and these are our saved views. And you can see I've got these under headings that are appropriate for our work stages. So our survey drawings, and under survey I will have plan views, elevation views, sectional views, and so on. And likewise the same under our planning drawings. We'll have plan views, elevational views, sectional views, and a few other bits and pieces. And the same for building regs drawings, that's our legal regulations and construction drawings. So that's how I choose to set up my drawings, and that same structure is taken through into the drawing sheets itself, which is this panel here. And then finally on the right hand side we have our publishing sets. So this is a group of drawings that you may choose to publish as PDFs, as DWGs, send to the printer, email to someone, you know, whatever your publishing process may be. So again, looking under the drawing sheets, we've got all our survey drawings under here. And I've pre-configured all the folders in a template file. So I have a template file which I spend a lot of time fine-tuning. It's never dead, it's never idle, it's always being tweaked and improved. And all of these folders are set up in that template file ready to go, so that when you start a project, effectively a drawing sheet is laid out for you. You know, if you put your building model in the right place, you will get your elevations, plans, sections, and so on automatically created. Now this is a modest drawing, so there's not an awful lot of information in here. If we go to our survey drawings, we've got a block plan and site plan, and under our GAs we've got this drawing here. You can see it's highlighted in black because it's the one that's open. And if we go over to our publishers section, you'll see under our survey drawings we've got the same. So this is the one we've currently got open, and this comprises both the floor plans of the building, so ground floor plan, first floor plan, and then a full set of elevations, and a quick photograph of the building. It's a stone cottage, typical of the area I function in here, although it's a modern interpretation of one. One of the reasons for choosing this project is it's a little bit unusual in that it's not rectilinear, which helps to illustrate the benefits of model-based design. You know, if you were going to generate that elevation on a 2D program, there's a lot of work involved in doing that. But again, all we're doing here is we just model the building and our views are created for us. We can choose where we want our elevations, which plane we want our elevations to be parallel to, and I've used the three rectilinear surfaces of the front part of the building as our main elevation elements, and everything else comes off that. So all of this comes from the model. So we've got a full set of, each of these is a separate elevation coming from the model, and each of these is a plan drawing coming from the model, a slice through the model. And if we look at those saved views, so let's pick up this one as an example. That's that drawing there. If I go to the settings button under that view with it selected, you can see how we can structure this saved view. So first of all, we give it a name, which is what appears on the label here. So this title for the saved view is carried through into the drawing sheet, and I'll show you how to do that later. What is the scale of that drawing? So it's 1 to 50, and that scale is carried through into the title block of the drawing, generated automatically. I'll show you how to do that later. So what is the structural display of that drawing? Well, I'm displaying it without finishes because I don't need finishes on my survey drawings. So I can have the whole model, I can show without finishes, so we can designate finishes within our walls, floors, roof, and other elements. We can show just the core, the structural core of our elements, and we can cover that a little bit later. And then beyond that, we have pen sets. So I have pre-configured sets, so I put my initials at the start of my pen sets to show what I'm using them for. So for a block plan, I have a particular pen set. For electrical and heating drawings, I have a particular pen set. So to describe that, when we're doing an electrical and heating drawing, we want to highlight the power points, the light switches, the light fittings, and so on, and all the heating elements with a heavier pen and possibly a different color. And so we can save that into a pen set. That's a really good example of how pen sets can be used. Elevations, I have a different one. Floor plans, I have a different one. And this is quite important. You know, when you're drawing a floor plan, you want your cut elements to be of a heavier line weight on the edges, so our walls would come out with a heavier outline on them. But if I show a heavier outline on those walls that are then generated in elevation, you end up with very heavy elevational drawings. So this is the reason these are separated. So for our elevations, I make all our external edges of our walls a little bit lighter, so the drawings are a little bit cleaner, and so on. Our sections, again, for similar reasons, we have a different pen sets for sections, and I have a different pen set for site plans, and I'll explain why site plans and block plans are different in a minute. And then our structural layouts, I can't remember what that one's for. Structural frames, so if we're just pulling out the structural frame of a building, then we will use a different pen set again. And then detailed drawings, I have different pen sets for. Model view options are quite important. So within our model view options, we can choose what of the elements and how those elements need to be displayed. So for example, we can display windows and doors differently depending on our model view options. So I could be doing a, let's say a very high scale, so maybe a 1 to 200 key drawing, just showing key elements of the drawing. Well, for that, I don't want detailed windows, for example. So we can use our model view option to say, just show the openings, show the zones in a different way, and I'll cover zones a bit later, and so on. So those are model view options, very powerful, very useful. Graphic overrides, I've got no graphic overrides on here, so this enables us to change the appearance of things like fills. So our 2D fill patterns, or hatch patterns as they're called in ArchiCAD language. I'm using no overrides on this drawing. And then what the renovation filter is. So the renovation filter is what enables us to do projects such as this, where we're working with an existing building, modifying it, extending it, and so on. So within my renovation filter, I can show the existing plan, I can show the demolition plan, so everything that is to be demolished. I can show what's left after demolition. I can show just the new construction. Or I can show the planned status. Now the planned status is what you end up with, okay? Now I also use the renovation filter for generating heating, electrical and lighting schemes, and this is quite cute, and I'll explain that hopefully at a later stage. You can do these things using layers, but the way I like to use ArchiCAD is slightly different to that, and I've got these as elements that can be viewed via the renovation filter. Then the units for the drawing and what the zoomed area, in other words the framing of the drawing, is. Don't worry too much about that, that's something that can be changed relatively easy on the drawing layout. One last thing is the floor plan cut plane settings. Okay, so this is where you cut through that floor plan. At what height above your floor level, and then what you're going to show from there. So that's the height of the cut, and then we can show upwards by amount from that cut, and we can show downwards by an amount from that cut. And there's many ways of controlling that. Bit of a fiddly one, this one in ArchiCAD, but and not all elements work the same way. It's a slight frustration. This walls are often difficult to work exactly as you'd want them, but you know, you can't have everything. So that's your cut plane settings. So all of that controls each of those views. We've got a little bit down here for 3D as well, if it was a 3D view, but most of our views are 2D in this instance. So that's a saved view, and these are all the things you can save with that view to then place in a drawing layout to then produce a drawing. So if I go to the block plan drawing for this, so for this survey of this building, we've only got 2 drawings. We've just got this one which shows floor plans and elevations, and we've got a block plan and site plan. I don't know why I've got no sections on this one. Didn't want to give the planners too much information. So here we have a block plan and site plan. Now here in the UK, most of our site plan data, and there's the site plan there. So the village, and this is the site we're dealing with, outlined in red. That red line is quite a heavy red line. Let me just switch to actual true line weight. So this is something you can do at any point in ArchiCAD. You show true line weight, and that's how it will print. So it's got a heavy red line around it. I don't like working in that mode. Every now and then you can switch to it, which is great. Very useful to be able to see exactly how it will print. So that's our site. As I say, in the UK, we get this data from the Ordnance Survey. There's a number of map providers that provide it, and that's what we download and place into a drawing sheet for identification purposes. Now, what's interesting about this and why I'm here is this is exactly the same drawing as that. It's come from the same drawing. The difference is it's a different scale, and I've used a different pen set. So as it makes it look like something that maybe I've drawn, helps to justify larger fees. Now it's just effectively taking this, punching a hole in it, and by punching a hole in it, I've just created some layers that are switched off when we're in the block plan drawing. I'll show you very quickly the layer structure that covers that. So this is my layer list. At the top, I've got location plan import. So everything that's in the location plan is on that layer. And then those elements that are for the site plan only go onto that layer. And site plan only, I switch off the text. I switch off everything that's inside here. And I switch off the Ordnance Survey grid lines. So all of those things are switched off, and that then creates our block plan. And then a hole is punched in it, and then this is a live view top plan of the proposed development. I've got a few things that should be switched off in the renovation status there, so I need to tidy that up a little bit. But that's an example of how you can use saved views and their various settings to create completely different drawings. And that will be a thread through this process. So by the time we get to construction drawings at the end, we will still be using the same drawings, but just with different things on and off and configured in different ways to create the drawings we want. So that's our survey drawings for this building. I'm going to go now all the way to the end and look at the building regs drawings for it. So these are our publisher sets, as I've said before, and a publisher set is an output from ArchiCAD. So whether that output is to print, whether it's to PDF, whether it's to DWG, and so on. Now, DWG is still fairly important to us. I said we work to BIM principles, but actually there's no one else we work with that does. And so with all our other professionals that we work with, we give them DWG files. So it's just a nature of the small scale projects that we work with. So let's have a quick look at the building regs documents. Now, for these, we've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drawings. It's a relatively modest project. So if we have a look at the ground floor, this is a ground floor plan showing, so there's the building as it was before, and this is our little addition on the side. Now there's some fairly tricky levels on this site. So, well, tricky levels, there are level changes. So the building, the part that the extension is on sits nearly 1 meter higher than the ground floor in here. So we've got stairs coming up through here from the existing into the extension, and we've created a little turret that they come up into. Out here is a swimming pool. It's a natural pool. This particular client builds natural pools, so he wanted a small one in his garden to help illustrate those pools. Over here we've got a model that's come out of Twinmotion, a quick view of the finished addition. And again, we've got our elevations. That's the road-facing elevation. There's our turret around the staircase. We've got some timber cladding here, and then we've got a bookend wall made out of natural stone. And again, a full set of elevations going on. Now, a couple of other things to note on this drawing, illustrating how we structure our ArchiCAD drawings. We've got a legend here of fire symbols. So these are generated automatically from the model. So if we put a symbol in, it goes into the legend. And the legend is a schedule, effectively. So we can schedule out information from our ArchiCAD model. And we're doing this just to create a simple legend. Another thing I like to do is to use QR codes to take you to manufacturers' details of particular products. And another cute thing to do is to put a hyperlink text in behind that in white, so that if someone's got a digital PDF version of that, they can actually just click on the QR codes and the hyperlink behind it works. So that's just another cute little thing you can do in pretty much any program, to be honest, but I like to do it in ArchiCAD. The elevation legend is again a schedule. So all of these labels are attached to a drawing element. Let's just take a quick look at that to show how that works. So if I open that source view, so we're opening that legend as a source view. So if I open that up, let's just minimize that a little bit to make it a bit easier to see. So this is how we generate that legend. Our settings for it are to find any element that happens to have a name attribute of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or H, and I can enlarge that if I want. because that's what I'm using to label these as their name element. I'll look at that in a moment. And then when we got those, just pull out both the name and the object type. And the object type is actually a description, a brief description of the objects. And that's the brief description. So there's our element, our object element type, I think I called it. And that's the name. Seem a bit the wrong way, but that's the way I've done it. Now I can click onto any of those and just say, show me that in the floor plan. And so there we go. That, well, that was the fascia. I didn't notice what I picked, but that's the powder coated aluminium fascia. So we can quickly select that. And all of this is dynamically controlled. So for example, if I think, oh no, I want to change that, let's make that 7018 RAL color. I can now change that there, and that will change with every instance of that object in the model. It will change its description. I can change its label here, and we'll make that H, let's say. And now if we close that off and come back to the drawing, which is this one, it'll take a few minutes to regen. And you'll see I will have messed up my drawing. And you'll see in every, I should have picked a wall, shouldn't I, where they appear on every elevation. But when this is regenerated, it will change the labels on the elevations. So, oh, of course, my list only went to G, so it's dropped that one off. But you can see if I zoom in on that one, my mistake, I put HE in there. But you can see what I mean. Everything is dynamically tied together. And this is the beauty of a model-based information-rich process, such as ArchiCAD. Not a good example, the one I used, but it's an example. Let me just go back in there and change that back before I get into trouble on this project. I can't change it back easily. Okay. So that's an example of how all of these elements are linked together. Now, another thing, when I'm teaching ArchiCAD, I always say to people as a starting point, the first thing you should do is every time you draw a line is ask yourself why. Why are you drawing a line? And drawing a line is almost entirely unnecessary in ArchiCAD, almost entirely unnecessary. And the reason for asking yourself is to say, well, could I be doing something better? And the general answer to that is yes, there is almost always a better way of drawing something than by drawing a line. You draw with objects, and we'll come into that in the later stages of the training. However, if you take this drawing, for example, it illustrates the second thing I would say to anyone learning to use ArchiCAD, and that is to never write text. The text itself is generated from the elements that are in the drawing. So my label text is generated generally from the elements within the drawing. Not always. There are odd occasions when you just have to say, you know what, it's easier just to write that than it is to model it and to label it. But for most of my project models, those descriptions come from the objects that we're drawing with. This is quite a nice little example. Down here we've got a slot drain running around the building because we've got level access between there and there, so we need to get rid of surface water. So a slot drain being a drain that sits just below the paving. Slot drain is perfectly modelled in 3D, so we get a nice slot drain that generates our sections nicely for us. But in 2D it's just a broken line. And that's all I need on my plan, is just a broken line. But it's data rich, so it describes itself. As soon as I put my label on it, it tells me what that object is. So a very, very slick process. Once we've got all of this up together, our drawings can come together very, very quickly indeed. And that's the case for pretty much everything in that drawing. So other drawings here, let's have a quick look at a section. I should have updated these before I started the recording. So there's a cut through the building. So here we can look at, there's the fascia board I was looking at that we've just changed the details on. So now mind you, I haven't put the color coding into that description. I have two descriptions in each object. There's our ACO drain, so that's the slot drain that I was talking about a minute ago. That's just a broken line in 2D. We've got a rainwater chain to drop the rainwater from this secret gutter. We've got a little secret gutter here and so on. So that's our building model. You can see a perfect section cut through, fully detailed, everything's there, and all of that is coming from the model. Another section, so this is cutting through the steps, again perfectly modeled, so that no matter what section we generate, we get exactly the right information we want. Got a bit of a stone detail and a retaining wall structure there, which is a historic thing. It becomes more of a retaining structure as we come closer to our cut point. Roof lights, again automatically generating their labels. So that's a drawing from the model. If we go to the last section here, this is a long section through the project, but it's also got all our building regs notation on it. So this is something that I feel in my drawings is relatively crude. So I have a full set of building regs notes, which are just basically almost like spec notes, I suppose. If I open that, you'll see what they are. And I have three sets, one for new dwellings, one for extensions, and one for refurbishment. Now in this case it's an extension, so I've used that one. And what I do, and this is horribly crude, I label them, I mark anything that needs to be varied on a project, I mark in red to remind me that may need to change. And anything that's for environmentally positive responses, so if we're choosing an eco solution, so if we've got a client that's particularly keen on eco solutions, I mark those as the green option and so on. So that's my building regs notes, and then they're just laid out. They're edited in the editor and then laid out on the drawing like that. So that's a fairly typical structure of the drawn information. What I'm going to look at now is the title block, because the title block is generally generated automatically or semi-automatically. And for our title block, we use what are called masters. Now, if I go back to our drawing sheets here and we just minimize these, so our survey drawings and our proposals, at the bottom you'll see masters. And this is where these come from. If I open that up, these are my personal saved masters. So you'll see in a ArchiCAD standard template, they'll be slightly different. The one I'm using here is my A1 standard. If I go back to this drawing and go to its view up here, let's just open it up. Sorry. You'll see down here it says A1 standard as its drawing sheet. If I want to change that to say A1 draft, it's not that drawing. It will come up with a statement. It's not that drawing proposed. Didn't change it, that's fine. There you go. It delivers my draft drawing for me. Now I've got templates that give a draft drawing, tender document statement, and various other bits and pieces. I can instantly change to a different drawing sheet by just choosing this one. If I felt this drawing could fit on an A3 sheet, I can just try it. If it was a presentation drawing, if I wanted something a little bit smarter, I can choose a presentation sheet. Excuse me. I'm going to stick with A1 standard, but instantly you can switch between drawing sheets. Now, within this drawing sheet, I have a drawing title, which is generated automatically. I have a project title, which is generated automatically. I have the project information, the client information, which is generated from a view. So what I have is a well, we'll have a look at it in a second. But that's generated and fed in pretty much automatically, and I'll show you that process in a moment. The title of the drawing is generated automatically. It comes from there. Okay, so when we start our drawing and name it, that's put into the title block. The date it's printed is something I choose to put on a drawing, and that is generated automatically. The scales of the drawings that are in the drawing sheet are generated automatically from the drawings that are placed. Who it's drawn by is generated automatically. The drawing number is generated automatically from here. The title blocks and that information is built within the object. Again, I like to have a QR code that takes people to our website. So let's have a look at how that works. If I go down to our masters and open up A1 standard, what I should say is all of that information that comes from the drawing sheet displays in red in the drawing sheet itself to say that it's coming from the master. So this is it. I have some disclaimers at the top, usual sort of thing. I like to put a check line on, so that check line measures exactly 100 mil. If you're delivering PDFs to people, you don't have any control over their printing processes. So I've had many situations where, and I know they shouldn't do it, but when you've had builders scaling off drawings on site, put something like that on there so they can just check, and it covers you as well. I think that's quite a good idea, just to say between those 2 points this should measure 100 mil. So at the moment I've blanked out the client information. So the layout name, that's there. If I click on that, I get the option to choose automatic text. So from the layout, so this layout here, I can choose any of those bits of automatic text. So the layout name, which is what I'm putting in here, the layout number, which is what's being put down there, the number of layouts, so you can get it to count the number of drawings on the sheet. Subset ID, that's the ID of the folder that it sits within. The subset name, which is the folder name, that's quite useful sometimes. Status code, I don't use those at all. So this is whether it's issued, not issued, so on. Any other comments, who it's been modified, who it's been checked by, and who it's been approved by. I don't use any of those because there's only me. So those are the sorts of things you can automate within your drawing title block. In addition to that, so what I didn't show was these others. So if we come up to here, we've got the ability to put in information beyond the layout. So the project itself. So we can pull project details, we can pull up from site details, we can pull from the building details, we can pull all sorts of information beyond the layout. So under each of these, we've got all sorts of information. So there's our dates and times, the individual drawings themselves. So we can put magnification status, scale, all those sorts of things can come out. So that's how we generate this. And we just generate it by placing some text in the normal way, but then choosing what that should be. And then there's our layout name that will generate automatically. If I go back now to our drawing sheet, you'll see an odd little proposed ground floor plan and elevations down there. It's as simple as that. So that's how we generate. Let's get rid of that before I get into trouble with the client again. So that's how our drawing sheets are structured. And then these sheets are all grouped together in their relevant publisher sets. Now, if we just quickly look at that, actually let me pull back that same drawing. So there's our ground floor plan, and we look at that set. So I'm going to look at the PDF set here. We have down the bottom, under our publishing sets management, our publishing properties for that publishing set. So what are we going to do with the publishing? Well, are we going to save them? Are we going to print them? Are we going to plot them? Or are we going to upload a BIMX hypermodel? I used to use BIMX hypermodels, really good, but since using Twinmotion, I've stopped using them. So BIMX hypermodel is effectively a navigable model that you can share with a client so they can wander through the building and so on. but it's also got hyperlinks within it so that you can your descriptions that you put into the model that I was describing earlier can be accessed by the client themselves, so they can click on an element and see what the description is and so on. In this instance, we're not printing, we're saving them to PDF. And if we save to PDF, we can create a single file. This again we can do with a BIMX hypermodel. So this is what this is defaulting to down here, or it can be a PDF or whatever other file format you want to choose. So DWG and so on is handled in a similar way. You can create, so that's as a single file for that whole folder. So if you create it as a PDF, all of the PDF sheets would be nested within a single PDF file. If you want to create a flat folder structure, you can choose that, and they're all just placed, and then you choose where you want to put them, and so that's where, and choose where they go. You can create a real folder structure by doing this, and then effectively they will be nested within each other if they are in here, nested within folders and so on. So that's how we output our excuse me, I need a sip of water. That's how we output our various publisher sets. If we take something like a DWG as an example, let's just drill into that a little bit deeper. If I look at the publishing sets here, all we're saying is create a flat file structure. So in other words, each DWG file will be separate, and we're not creating a folder structure based on the folder structure we may have used within here. So that's the default that you would use for creating DWGs, and within here you tell it where you want to put those DWGs. If I now open the DWG setting, so if I now open this, there's our same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drawings. I click on any one, we can choose how we create that DWG. So we have a number of defaults as far as DWG is concerned. We have for further editing, we have for as is output, we have keep pen index number or special built-in translator. Now, Graphisoft comes with a really good DWG translator, which enables us to do all sorts of things with the DWG. So further editing is fairly straightforward. Just create a DWG in DWG format that anyone that can read a DWG can use. For as is output is different. So what that does is it creates a flat DWG file of that layout. So we don't have what would be paper space views in AutoCAD. It is just a scaled set of drawings. So this would be at 1 to 50. So you don't need to make it 50 times bigger if you wanted it to be back to 1 to 1 and so on. So that's an as-is output, very rarely needed, to be honest. Keep pen index numbers. So what this does is the pen index numbers that are used in ArchiCAD are then translated to the same pen index numbers in AutoCAD. So a pen 1 in ArchiCAD becomes a pen 1 in ArchiCAD, in AutoCAD and so on. For further editing is the obvious one to use. And if I click on the translators button, you can see the sorts of things we can do to control the output of our DWG. So I've got save options here, and I can save options to the save options. So every time we save a DWG, these are the options that will be saved with it. So what format of AutoCAD do you want it to go to? So I would choose pretty much the oldest one. I don't know why it's not 2000, but 2004, it should be 2000 really. You may as well go for the oldest one, because the nice thing with AutoCAD is it can open old DWG files, which is the problem with ArchiCAD, as I mentioned before. So if you pump it out in the oldest version, it gives you maximum compatibility. Convert images, so any images, have we got any images in there? Yeah, we've got an image there. Will be kept in images original format here, or we can change them to different formats to suit the receiver. And this is the important thing with this, is we can create a template that suits the person who's taking the AutoCAD DWG file. what those views will be. So in this case, my drawing is going to be paper space with cropped views content, and that's the preferred one for me. My drawings go on a long way beyond that view. I don't necessarily want the receiver to get all that information. It may not be relevant or whatever. So that's the option I would normally choose. If you choose the full view, then they'll get everything else there that's in the model. Place the drawings into a single DWG file, that's fine. You can also change that to being linked XREF drawings, so externally referenced, so similar to the way we externally reference in ArchiCAD, so you can have them all pulled into that layout. Complex elements saved to block, so anything that's a complex element in ArchiCAD becomes an AutoCAD block. It's fairly straightforward, and zones become stamp and fill in AutoCAD, because AutoCAD doesn't have zones in the way we have, and we haven't explained zones yet, but I'll explain them later. So a lot of control over how the DWG file is created, and we can cover that in more detail at a later stage. It's quite an important thing, this, and we're probably at an early stage for covering it because of our ArchiCAD knowledge. But you can see here, you know, we can convert layers to different layers. We can convert pens and colors to different pens and colors, and create a whole profile of how that project file can look in AutoCAD to suit the recipient. And that's a very important thing. Really good DWG creation. So one last thing I wanted to show you before we clip out. This is another drawing from this project file. I brought in a couple of Twinmotion images here. So this is the first floor plan, but I've also got a setting out plan for the roof structure. We've got a couple of steels in there. We've got a post pop down below there. And again, everything's 3D, 2D. But what we have done here is we've got a three-dimensional view of this, but we've also got a QR code that will take you to the model, that model, or in the case of the rainwater chain, to that model. So a contractor, or client for that matter, but mainly the contractor who is a bit unsure about how something fits together, they can just scan the QR code and they can pick up that 3D model of the cutaway of the roof. So a really nice way of expanding your communication tools is you know, say Twinmotion is my final output stage, and it's really nice to be able to show those. So if you were to scan that now and use that password, you will be able to get onto that model and see how that looks. Anyway, I hope that wasn't too much of a confusing first session. So this is a quick overview of ArchiCAD 20 and how I choose to use ArchiCAD 20. I say things are a little bit different to the way Graphisoft set it up, but this is how I like to use it, and this has been refined over the last 30 years. Thanks for your time. Hope you enjoy it. Look forward to seeing you on video number 2.